The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled the Orion Spur for 600 years. Their method was simple and effective. Find a weaker species, show them overwhelming force, watch them kneel. It had worked on the Thren, who now served as laborers in Valkyrie mines. It had worked on the Kasari, whose beautiful homeworld now flew Valkyrie flags. It had worked on 12 other species across 300 star systems. Commander Threskan stood on the bridge of his cruiser, the Dominant Will, and watched the sensor display with hungry eyes. His scales shifted from dark blue to bright purple, a sign of excitement among his kind. 3 ships under his command. 3,000 warriors ready for action. And floating before them in the cold emptiness of space was a single human vessel. The ship was called the Autumn's Grace. It was a small thing, barely 200 meters long. Its hull was plain gray metal with patches of rust-colored coating. Large cargo containers hung from its sides like fruit from a dying tree. The communication dishes on its surface were old models, at least 30 years outdated. The engine signature was weak and flickering. "Scan results, Subcommander?" Threskan asked. His second officer, a younger Valkyrie named Cresvon, studied his console. "Minimal weapon signatures, Commander. Standard point defense systems only. Crew complement appears to be 40 to 50 individuals. Cargo holds are full. Based on their trajectory, they are heading toward the merchant colonies." Threskan made a sound of satisfaction deep in his throat. "Humans," he said the word like it tasted strange. "What do we know of them?" "A young species, Commander. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. Their expansion has been slow and careful. They prefer trade and diplomacy over conflict. Our intelligence reports indicate they have avoided every major war in this sector." "Cowards," another officer muttered from across the bridge. Threskan flicked his tail in agreement. "Or simply wise enough to know their place. They see the strength of others and choose submission over destruction. A practical species, if not an honorable one." He studied the human ship again. It hung in space like a wounded animal, unaware of the predators circling. The humans had no allies in this region, no fleet waiting to rescue them. They were alone, and they were weak. "Open a communication channel," Threskan ordered. The main view screen flickered to life. After a moment, a human face appeared. It belonged to a female, though Threskan found it difficult to tell with their species. Her skin was brown and weathered, marked with lines around her eyes and mouth. Her hair was gray and cut short. She wore a simple uniform of dark blue fabric. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the cargo vessel Autumn's Grace," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You are transmitting on an emergency frequency. Do you require assistance?" Threskan almost laughed. The creature thought they needed help. "Human vessel, I am Commander Threskan of the Valkyrie Dominion. You have entered space under our protection. Your cargo and crew are now subject to inspection and tariff collection." The human captain did not react with fear. She did not beg or plead. She simply tilted her head slightly, the way one might look at an interesting insect. "I was not aware this region fell under Valkyrie jurisdiction. Our charts show it as neutral territory." "Your charts are wrong. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction." Threskan let his words hang in the air. He had spoken these same words to dozens of captains from dozens of species. The response was always the same: fear, compliance, surrender. Captain Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. She looked away from the screen, exchanging glances with someone outside the camera's view. When she looked back, her expression had changed. It was subtle, so subtle that Threskan almost missed it. The lines around her eyes had deepened. Her jaw had tightened. Something that might have been a smile touched the corner of her mouth. Commander Threscan, she said slowly, I want to make sure I understand your position. You are demanding that we surrender our ship and cargo to you, and if we refuse, you will attack us. That is correct, human. You have 5 minutes to comply. And you are aware that the Autumn's Grace is registered as a civilian vessel under the protection of the United Earth Government? Threscan waved a clawed hand dismissively. Your government is far away, human. Their protection means nothing here. You are alone. I see. Vasquez leaned back in her chair. She folded her hands in her lap. Her eyes never left the screen. Commander, I am going to give you some advice. I am going to give it to you once, and I am going to speak very clearly so there is no confusion. Threscan felt his scales shift color again, this time toward red. Anger. You are in no position to give advice, human. Turn your ships around, Vasquez continued, as if he had not spoken. Leave this area. Forget you ever saw us. Go back to your dominion and tell no one of this encounter. Do this, and everyone on your ships will live to see another day. The bridge of the dominant will fell silent. Every officer stared at the view screen in disbelief. Threscan felt his heart's beating faster. Was this human insane? Did she not understand what was happening? You threaten us? He hissed. You, in your rusted cargo ship, threaten 3 Valkyrie cruisers? Vasquez shook her head slowly. No, Commander. I am not threatening you. I am warning you. There is a difference. A threat is what you do to someone you want to frighten. A warning is what you give to someone you are trying to save. Threscan slammed his fist against his command console. Enough. You have wasted your 5 minutes with foolish words. All ships, target the human vessel. Fire warning shot at their engine section. Show them what happens to those who insult the Valkyrie Dominion. The dominant will shuddered as its plasma cannons discharged. A bolt of superheated energy crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second. It struck the Autumn's Grace on its rear quarter, exactly where Threscan had intended. The human ship rocked from the impact. Sparks flew from its hull. A small fire burned briefly before the vacuum of space extinguished it. Damage report on the human vessel, Threscan demanded. Minor hull breach in their cargo section, Cresvan reported. Their engines are still functional. They are, Commander, something is happening. Threscan turned back to the view screen. What he saw made his scales drain of all color, shifting to the pale white of pure terror. The Autumn's Grace was changing. Panels on its hull were sliding apart. The cargo containers that had seemed so heavy and awkward were opening like flowers blooming in fast motion. Shapes emerged from within them, shapes that glinted with polished metal, shapes that looked very much like weapons. On the communication screen, Captain Vasquez had not moved from her chair, but her smile was wider now. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Commander Threscan, she said softly, you have made a mistake. The transformation took less than 30 seconds. To Commander Threscan, watching from the bridge of the dominant will, it felt like a lifetime. The cargo containers that had hung from the sides of the Autumn's Grace split open like seed pods. Inside were not trade goods or supplies. Inside were rows upon rows of missile tubes, each one already glowing with the heat of weapons ready to fire. The rust-colored patches on the hull fell away, revealing armor plating that gleamed like polished silver. The old communication dishes folded backward and disappeared, replaced by targeting arrays that swiveled toward the Valkyrie ships with terrible purpose. What had seemed like a dying animal was now very clearly a predator that had been pretending to sleep. What is this? Cresvan whispered. His voice cracked with disbelief. Our scans showed no weapons. Our sensors detected nothing. They tricked us, another officer said. They hid everything. But how? Our technology is superior. Our sensors can detect silence, Threscan roared. But his voice did not carry the authority it had moments ago. Even he could hear the fear in it. On the view screen, Captain Elena Vasquez had risen from her chair. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her feet planted wide. Behind her, the bridge of the Autumn's Grace had also transformed. What had looked like a simple merchant vessel control room was now clearly a military command center. Officers in dark uniforms worked at consoles covered in displays and weapons controls. The lighting had shifted from warm yellow to cold blue. "Commander Threscan," Vasquez said. Her voice was still calm, but there was iron beneath it now. "I gave you a warning. I told you to leave. You chose not to listen. That choice has consequences." Threscan forced his scales to shift back toward purple. He would not show fear to this human. "You think this changes anything? You have one ship. We have 3. Even with your hidden weapons, you cannot defeat us." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. It was such a small gesture, but somehow it made Threscan feel like a child being scolded by an elder. "Let me explain something to you, Commander," she said. "Something about humans that your intelligence reports clearly failed to mention. We are not a young species. We have been fighting wars since before we could write. We have been killing each other with stone tools, with metal blades, with gunpowder and nuclear fire. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of destruction before we ever left our planet." She took a step closer to the screen. Her eyes were hard and cold. "When we finally reached the stars, we found a galaxy full of species who had never known true war. Species who fought for territory, or pride, or honor. Species who accepted surrender and showed mercy because they had never faced an enemy that would rather die than submit." Vasquez shook her head slowly. "We are not that kind of enemy, Commander. We do not fight for glory. We do not fight for territory. When we fight to end the fighting, permanently, completely. We fight to make sure the enemy can never threaten us again." Threscan felt his heart pounding. He wanted to dismiss her words as bluster. He wanted to believe that his 3 cruisers could still overwhelm this single human ship. But something in her voice, something in the way she stood, told him that she was not making empty threats. She was stating facts. "The Autumn's Grace is what we call a Q ship," Vasquez continued. "It is a military vessel designed to look like a civilian transport. The concept is very old. We used it on the oceans of our homeworld centuries ago. Ships that looked weak and helpless would lure pirates and enemy vessels close. And then—" She spread her hands. "Well, you are about to find out what happens then." She turned away from the screen and spoke to her crew. "Lieutenant Chen, activate the emergency beacon. I want this recorded. I want the galaxy to see what happens when someone attacks a human vessel without cause." "Beacon active, Captain," a young officer replied, "broadcasting on all frequencies." Vasquez turned back to face Threscan. "I am going to give you one final chance, Commander. Not because you deserve it, but because I am tired, and I would rather not fill out the paperwork that comes after a battle. Order your ships to power down their weapons. Surrender your vessels to human custody. You and your crews will be returned to the Dominion after a formal inquiry." For a moment, Threscan considered it. For a moment, the fear that gripped his heart almost won. But then he looked around at his officers. He saw their eyes upon him. He saw their scales shifting with uncertainty. If he surrendered now to a single human ship, he would be disgraced forever. His family name would be erased from the records. His children would be cast out. Death was better than such shame. "All ships," he commanded, his voice steady despite the terror beneath it. "Target the human vessel. All weapons, fire on my command." Captain Vasquez sighed. It was a small sound, tired and sad. "Very well, Commander. You have made your choice." She looked at someone off-screen. Weapons free. Target their reactor cores. I want this over quickly. Wait, Threscan said. Reactor cores? The honorable targets are engines and weapons. You should disable us, not... Honor, Vasquez interrupted, is a luxury for those who have never truly faced extinction. We learned long ago that wounded enemies are still enemies. A ship without engines can still fire weapons. A ship without weapons can still ram. A ship without a reactor core cannot do anything at all. She paused. The communication channel closed. The view screen went dark. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The Autumn's Grace hung in space before them, now revealed in its true form. Its weapons were aimed at the dominant will and its sister ships. Its armor gleamed in the light of distant stars. Then the humans opened fire. The missiles were not large, they were small and fast, barely visible on the sensor displays. But there were dozens of them, then hundreds, pouring from the Autumn's Grace like a swarm of angry insects. They moved with impossible speed, weaving and dodging, splitting and rejoining. Point defense, Threskin screamed. Shoot them down! The Valkyrie guns fired. They were good guns, among the best in the sector. They struck some of the missiles, exploding them in brief flashes of light. But there were too many. For every missile destroyed, 5 more slipped through. The first wave hit the lead cruiser, the Proud Fang. The ship had been Threscan's pride, commanded by his own brother. It was 200 years old, veteran of a dozen campaigns. It died in 3 seconds. The missile struck its reactor section with surgical precision. The explosions tore through the ship's heart, through the containment fields that held its power source stable. The reactor went critical. The Proud Fang vanished in a ball of white fire that briefly outshone the nearby sun. 1,000 Valkyrie warriors, gone, just like that. Threscan stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had been his brother's ship. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. This could not be happening. This was not how battles worked. Ships exchanged fire. They did not disappear in an instant. They maneuvered. They fought for hours sometimes, before one side admitted defeat. The humans had destroyed a Valkyrie cruiser in 3 seconds. On the Autumn's Grace, Captain Vasquez watched the destruction with no expression on her weathered face. Her crew worked around her in focused silence. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They were professionals doing a job they had trained for their entire lives. Target the second cruiser, Vasquez ordered. Same pattern, reactor core, make it clean. Lieutenant Chen nodded. Aye, Captain. Missiles away. Threscan watched the second wave of missiles streak toward the swift blade. He wanted to help, wanted to do something, but his ship was too far away, and the missiles were too fast. He could only watch as another of his vessels died. The swift blade tried to run. Its captain, a clever female named Veskari, ordered full power to engines. The ship lurched forward, trying to escape the swarm. For 11 seconds, it seemed like she might succeed. The ship pulled ahead of the missiles, gaining distance. Then the missiles adjusted their course. They were not stupid weapons, launched and forgotten. They were smart, guided by computers that tracked their targets with cold precision. The swift blade could not outrun them. Nothing in the Valkyrie fleet could outrun them. The second cruiser died screaming, its hull torn apart by explosions that rippled through it from stern to bow. Threskin watched the escape pods launch, tiny specks against the fireball. He watched the missiles ignore them. Small mercy. Now only the dominant will remained. One ship against the humans. One ship that had seemed so powerful just minutes ago. Threskin looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes. He saw the knowledge of death. Human vessel, I wish to surrender. We will power down our weapons. We will... The missiles were already coming. Commander Threscon watched the missiles approach his ship on the sensor display. There were 47 of them. Small lights moving across the screen, like stars falling in formation. Each one carried enough explosive power to tear through Valkyrie armor like paper. "Human vessel," he shouted into the communication system. "I am surrendering. We are powering down our weapons. Please respond." Silence. The missiles did not slow down. They did not change course. They continued their steady approach toward the dominant will with mechanical patience. "They are not responding, Commander," Cressvon reported. His voice trembled. "All channels are open, but they are not answering." Threscon slammed his fist against his console. "Why? We are surrendering. We are offering to give up. That is what civilized species do. They accept surrender." No one had an answer to give. On the bridge of the Autumn's Grace, Captain Vasquez stood with her arms crossed, watching the tactical display. The Valkyrie commander's pleas came through the speakers, his voice growing more desperate with each passing second. She listened, without expression. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen said quietly, "he is surrendering. Should we abort the attack?" Vasquez did not turn to look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the display. "Lieutenant, tell me, when did Commander Threscan decide to surrender?" Chen hesitated. "After we destroyed his other 2 ships, Captain." "Before that, what did he do?" "He fired on us. He demanded our surrender. He ignored your warnings." Vasquez nodded slowly. "He had 3 chances to walk away. First, when we told him to leave. Second, when we revealed our true nature. Third, when we destroyed his first ship. He only wishes to surrender now, because he is losing." She finally turned to look at Chen. Her eyes were tired, but firm. "There is an old human saying, Lieutenant. You cannot start a fight and then complain about the rules. Commander Threscan started this. He decided the terms of engagement when he fired on our ship. We did not choose these terms. We are simply following them to their logical end." Chen nodded, though his face was pale. "Aye, Captain. I understand." Vasquez turned back to the display. "Humans accept surrender, Lieutenant. We do so gladly, but only when it is offered before hostilities begin. Once the first shot is fired at a human vessel." She paused. "Once that line is crossed, there is no going back. That is the rule. That has always been the rule. If we allowed enemies to surrender after attacking us, they would learn that attacking us has no real cost. They would try again and again, knowing they could always back out when things went badly." She shook her head. "No. We are teachers, in a way, and this is the lesson we teach. Attack a human ship, and you die. Simple, clear, impossible to misunderstand." On the dominant will, Threscon had stopped pleading. He understood now, in his final moments, what he was facing. This was not an enemy like any he had known. This was not a species that fought for glory, or territory, or pride. This was a species that fought the way a storm fights, the way a wildfire fights. Without mercy, without compromise, without end. "All hands," he said softly into the ship's communication system. "Prepare for impact. It has been an honor serving with you." The missiles struck. The dominant will was a proud ship. It had served the Valkyrie Dominion for 150 years. It had carried 3 generations of commanders into battle. Its name was written in the histories of a dozen conquered worlds. It died in 8 seconds. The first wave of missiles hit the shield generators. The shields held for 2 seconds, then collapsed under the sustained assault. The second wave hit the armor plating, tearing great holes in the ship's hide. The third wave entered those holes and found the reactor core. The explosion was brief and bright. Where there had been a ship, there was now only fire and debris. Commander Threscan's final thought, in the microsecond before his consciousness ended, was a question. Why would they not accept our surrender? He never received an answer. But the answer existed, written in the blood and history of humanity's long climb from caves to stars. Because surrender after attack teaches nothing. Because mercy after violence encourages more violence. Because the only way to stop a predator is to make it fear you more than it desires your flesh. Humans had learned this lesson the hard way, through 10,000 years of war against themselves. They had learned that kindness without strength was weakness. They had learned that forgiveness without consequence was invitation. They had learned that peace was not the absence of war, but the result of making war too costly to consider. And now they were teaching this lesson to the galaxy. On the Autumn's Grace, the bridge crew watched the debris cloud expand in silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of what they had done hung in the air like smoke. Finally, Lieutenant Chen broke the silence. 3,000 dead, Captain. 3 ships destroyed. In under 5 minutes. Vasquez nodded. Record the time and location. Document everything. I want a full report ready before we reach port. Aye, Captain. Captain. Permission to speak freely. Granted. Was this necessary? All of it. Could we not have found another way? Vasquez turned to face her young officer. She studied him for a long moment, seeing the doubt in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. He was new to the service. He had trained for battle, but training was not the same as doing. He had just participated in the deaths of 3,000 sentient beings. Lieutenant, she said gently, come here. Chen approached. Vasquez put a hand on his shoulder. You are asking the wrong question. The question is not whether we could have found another way. The question is whether any other way would have worked. She gestured toward the view screen, toward the expanding debris field. If we had surrendered, what would have happened? They would have taken our ship, taken our crew, sold us into slavery, or held us for ransom. And they would have learned that humans are easy prey. Word would spread. Other predators would come for other human ships. People would die. Our people. She squeezed his shoulder. If we had disabled their ships instead of destroying them, what would have happened? They would have been rescued by their own kind. They would have reported what they saw, and they would have come back with bigger ships, more guns, more warriors, because they would have learned that humans are dangerous, but not deadly. A challenge to overcome, not a threat to avoid. She released him and turned back to the view screen. But this teaches a different lesson. This teaches them that attacking a human ship is suicide. Not dangerous, not risky. Suicide. No exceptions, no escape. You attack us, you die. Simple, clear, permanent. She was quiet for a moment. It is not a kind lesson, Lieutenant. It is not a merciful lesson. But it is an effective one, and in the long run, it will save more lives than it costs. Both human lives and alien lives. Because species like the Valkyrie will think twice before attacking us again. They will decide that we are not worth the risk, and they will leave us alone. Chen considered her words. Slowly, he nodded. I understand, Captain. Thank you. Go. Prepare your report. We have a long journey ahead. As Chen returned to his station, Vasquez remained at the view screen. She watched the debris drift, watched the last traces of fire fade into the cold void of space. She did not feel proud of what she had done. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired, and old, and sad. But she also felt certain. This was the way. This had always been the way. Humanity had not survived 10,000 years of self-destruction by being gentle. They had survived by being so terrifying that their enemies chose peace over war. It was not a pretty truth, but it was truth. And now the galaxy would begin to learn it. The recording arrived at Earth's United Naval Command exactly 14 hours after the battle ended. It came through encrypted channels, marked with the highest priority codes. Within minutes, it was being reviewed by admirals and generals in secure rooms across the planet. Within hours, it had been classified analyzed, and archived. A report was written. Recommendations were made. Decisions were reached. The response to the Valkyrie Dominion was drafted by a committee of diplomats who specialized in first contact situations. It was reviewed by military advisors who understood the implications. It was approved by the highest levels of human government. The message was sent exactly 48 hours after the battle. 6,000 light-years away, in the Grand Council chamber of the Valkyrie Dominion, High Lord Vextan read the human response with growing confusion. The chamber around him was filled with the most powerful members of his species. Council elders who had ruled for centuries. Military commanders who had conquered dozens of worlds. Trade masters who controlled the wealth of 1,000 systems. All of them waited in silence as Vextan read the human words. The crew of the cargo vessel Autumn's Grace acted in accordance with established human military doctrine regarding unprovoked aggression. We consider the matter closed. We hope the Valkyrie Dominion will reconsider their approach to future encounters with human vessels. Respectfully, the United Earth Government. Vextan read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. Then he looked up at the assembled council. They consider the matter closed, he said slowly. 3 of our cruisers destroyed, 3,000 of our warriors dead, and they consider the matter closed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Scales shifted colors in patterns of confusion and anger. This is an insult, shouted Commander Kresvak, one of the younger military leaders. They slaughter our people and then dismiss us like we are nothing. We must respond with overwhelming force. We must show them that the Dominion does not forgive such attacks. Several others voiced agreement. The chamber filled with calls for war, for vengeance, for the complete destruction of human civilization. Vextan raised a clawed hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted. Before we speak of vengeance, he said, we should review the recording that accompanied this message. He gestured to an aide, who activated the chamber's display systems. The recording began to play. For the next several minutes, the council watched in silence as the battle unfolded before them. They watched Commander Threscon issue his demands. They watched Captain Vasquez give her warning. They watched the Autumn's Grace transform from a helpless cargo ship into a weapon of terrifying power. They watched their cruisers die. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The calls for war had fallen silent. The demands for vengeance had faded. Every member of the council had just witnessed something they had never seen before. They had seen a human fight. Play it again, Elder Threshvon said quietly. She was the oldest member of the council. Her scales faded to pale gray, her eyes clouded with age, but her mind was still sharp. The part where the human captain speaks of their history, play that again. The aide rewound the recording. Captain Vasquez's voice filled the chamber once more. We are not a young species. We have been fighting wars since before we could write. We have been killing each other with stone tools, with metal blades, with gunpowder, and nuclear fire. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of destruction before we ever left our planet. Elder Threshvon raised a hand, and the recording paused. 10,000 years, she said softly, of war, against themselves. She looked around at the council, at the warriors and rulers who had built an empire on conquest. We have never faced an enemy like this. We fight for power, we fight for territory, we fight for glory. But these humans, she shook her head slowly, they have been at war with themselves for longer than our civilization has existed. They have more experience with death and destruction than any species in the known galaxy. Commander Kresvak snorted. Experience means nothing. We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior technology? Threshvon interrupted. Our sensors could not detect their weapons. Our shields could not stop their missiles. Our ships could not outrun their attacks. 3 cruisers against 1 disguised cargo vessel. and we lost. She let that sink in. Imagine what would happen if we faced their actual warships. The chamber fell silent again. There is something else, Threshvan continued. Something more important than their weapons or their experience. She gestured to the recording. The human captain gave Commander Threshvan 3 chances to retreat. 3 chances, she warned him. She told him exactly what would happen if he attacked. And when he did attack anyway, she kept her word. She rose from her seat, her old bones creaking. That is what frightens me most, Council. Not their weapons, not their history, but their consistency. They said they would destroy anyone who attacked them, and they did exactly that. No hesitation, no mercy, no exceptions. She turned to face the High Lord. Their message says they consider the matter closed. They are not asking for compensation. They are not demanding territory. They are not threatening further action. They killed 3,000 of our warriors, and they want nothing from us. Vextan frowned. Then what do they want? They want us to learn, Threshvan said simply. This was a lesson, High Lord. A demonstration. They are showing us what happens to those who attack them without cause. And they are showing us that this is the minimum response. They held nothing back, but they also did not escalate. They did not pursue our survivors. They did not attack our other vessels in the region. They defended themselves, and then they stopped. She returned to her seat. The humans are not threatening us. They are warning us. There is a significant difference. A threat comes from an enemy who wants something from you. A warning comes from someone who wants nothing except to be left alone. The council sat in uncomfortable silence. Everything Elder Threshvan had said made sense. And that was the most disturbing part of all. High Lord Vextan studied the recording one more time. He watched the Autumn's Grace reveal its true nature. He watched his ships die. He watched Captain Vasquez's face as she gave the order to fire. There was no anger in that face, no hatred, no triumph, just tired determination. The face of someone doing an unpleasant job because it needed to be done. We will not respond with force, Vextan said finally. We will send no fleets against the humans. We will issue no declarations of war. Commander Kresvok sputtered with outrage. High Lord, our honor demands. Our honor demands nothing, Vextan cut him off. Our survival demands everything. The humans have shown us what they are capable of. They have shown us what happens when we attack them. If we are wise, we will learn from this lesson instead of demanding a second one. He stood and addressed the entire council. From this moment forward, no Valkyrie vessel will initiate hostilities with any human ship. Any commander who violates this order will be stripped of rank and executed. We will not give the humans a reason to demonstrate their capabilities again. He looked toward the recording one final time. The matter is closed, for them and for us. The council meeting ended. The members dispersed to their ships and stations. Word spread throughout the Dominion. The humans were not to be touched. The humans were not to be provoked. The humans were dangerous in ways that the Valkyrie had never imagined. And across the galaxy, other species began to hear the same story. A human cargo ship destroyed 3 Valkyrie cruisers, a single vessel against an empire's patrol fleet. The prey had become the predator. The lesson was being learned. 6 months passed. The galaxy continued to turn. Ships traveled between stars. Trade flowed. Empires rose and fell in the distant reaches of space. And the story of the Autumn's Grace spread. It traveled through merchant networks and diplomatic channels. It was whispered in spaceport bars and discussed in military academies. Every species in the Orion Spur heard some version of the tale. A lone human ship, 3 Valkyrie cruisers, total destruction in under 5 minutes. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Some claimed it was human propaganda. but the Velkari themselves confirmed it was true. High Lord Vextan had made no attempt to hide what happened. He had no desire to invite more humans to prove themselves again. In the merchant colonies, traders began to notice something interesting. Human ships were no longer being harassed. Pirates who had once targeted human cargo vessels now gave them wide berths. Customs officials who had demanded bribes suddenly became polite and efficient. The galaxy had decided that humans were not worth the trouble. This new reality was tested 6 months after the battle, when a Velkari merchant vessel named the Trading Fortune suffered a catastrophic engine failure in human-controlled space. Captain Threxvan of the Trading Fortune watched his engine readouts with growing dread. The primary coils had overheated. The secondary systems had failed to compensate. His ship was drifting, powerless, through territory that belonged to the very species his people had learned to fear. "How long until we can restart the engines?" he asked his engineer. 3 days minimum, Captain. Maybe longer. We need parts we do not have." Threxvan closed his eyes. 3 days, adrift in human space. After what the Dominion had done to human ships for centuries. After what had happened to Commander Threscan. He expected death. He expected revenge. He expected the humans to treat him the way his people had treated so many others. What he did not expect was the message that came through his communication system 6 hours later. "Velkari vessel, this is the United Earth rescue ship, Helping Hand. We have detected your distress beacon. Do you require assistance?" Threxvan stared at the console in disbelief. He opened the channel with trembling claws. "Human vessel, yes, we have suffered engine failure. We are adrift. We need—" He hesitated. "Why are you offering to help us?" There was a pause on the other end. Then a human voice, warm and slightly amused, responded. "Because you are in trouble, and we are nearby. Standard rescue protocol. We should be at your position in about 2 hours. Sit tight." The Helping Hand arrived exactly when promised. It was a medium-sized vessel, painted bright orange and white, with the universal symbol for medical assistance displayed on its hull. It carried no visible weapons, though after the autumn's grace, Threxvan knew that meant nothing. The human crew came aboard the Trading Fortune with toolkits and spare parts. They worked alongside Velkari engineers without complaint. They did not demand payment, they did not threaten, they did not gloat. They simply helped. When the engines were repaired, the human commander, a tall male named Captain James Walker, came to speak with Threxvan personally. "Your engines should hold until you reach your destination," Walker said. "We have also uploaded some navigation data to help you avoid the more dangerous shipping lanes. There have been some pirate activities in this sector." Threxvan struggled to find words. "Why?" he finally managed. "After what our people did to your ships, after what happened with Commander Threscan, why would you help us?" Walker looked at him with genuine confusion. "What does Commander Threscan have to do with anything? He attacked your cargo ship, the one that destroyed his fleet. I thought—" Threxvan's voice trailed off. Understanding dawned on Walker's face. He smiled, though there was something sad in it. "Captain Threxvan, Commander Threscan attacked a human vessel without provocation. He fired the first shot. What happened to him was a consequence of his choice. It had nothing to do with you." He put a hand on Threxvan's shoulder. The gesture was strange, but somehow comforting. "You did not attack us. You asked for help. Those are very different things, and we treat them very differently." Threxvan felt his scales shifting through colors he could not control. Confusion, relief, something that might have been shame. "I do not understand you humans," he admitted. "You destroy 3 ships without mercy. Then you repair one without asking for anything. How can you be both things?" Walker considered the question carefully before answering. "Because they are not 2 different things, Captain. They are the same thing. We believe in proportional response. You give us violence, we give you violence back, multiplied. You give us kindness, we give you kindness back, multiplied. You leave us alone, we leave you alone. Simple rules, easy to follow, and completely consistent. He gestured toward the view screen, toward the stars beyond. The galaxy is full of species who have not figured this out yet. They think we are weak because we prefer peace. They think they can take advantage of our kindness. Commander Threscan thought that. He learned otherwise. Walker's expression hardened briefly. But you, Captain, you have done nothing wrong. You broke down in our space and asked for help. That is not aggression. That is not a threat. That is a person in trouble. And humans help people in trouble. That is also who we are. Threxvan nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. The humans were not unpredictable at all. They were perhaps the most predictable species in the galaxy. Their rules were simple and absolute. Their responses were perfectly matched to the behavior they encountered. Help them, and they would help you. Leave them alone, and they would leave you alone. Attack them, and they would erase you from existence. 3 simple rules, 3 outcomes, nothing complicated, nothing hidden. As the helping hand departed, Threxvan watched it disappear into the distance. He thought about the story he would tell when he returned home. Not the story of human violence, which everyone already knew, but the story of human kindness, which was perhaps more important. Because the violence was frightening, yes, but it was the kindness that was truly terrifying. It meant that the humans were not monsters. It meant they were not acting out of hatred or cruelty. It meant they made choices, conscious and deliberate choices, about how to respond to every situation. They could have been cruel to him. They had every right after what the Dominion had done. But they chose to be kind instead, because he had done nothing to earn their cruelty. That was the most important lesson. The violence against Threscan was not rage or revenge. It was policy, calculated, precise, and completely impersonal. And the kindness toward Threxvan was the same policy, applied to different circumstances. Humans did not fight because they enjoyed it. They did not kill because they hated their enemies. They did these things because they had decided long ago that this was how they would survive. This was how they would make the galaxy safe for themselves and their children. And it was working. Across the Orion Spur, species were learning the lesson. The Velkari had learned it first, but others were following. The Thren Collective changed their policies toward human vessels. The Kasari Republic signed a new trade agreement. The merchant colonies offered humans favorable port fees. No one wanted to be the next Commander Threscan. Everyone wanted to be the next Captain Threxvan. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. The humans called their approach proportional response. Other species called it wisdom. Some called it terrifying. But everyone called it effective. In her retirement cottage on a quiet colony world, Captain Elena Vasquez heard the news of the Helping Hand and its rescue mission. She smiled to herself and poured a cup of tea. The lesson was spreading. The galaxy was learning. Peace through strength, kindness through power, mercy for those who deserved it, destruction for those who did not. It was not a pretty philosophy. It was not a gentle one. But it worked. It had always worked. And now the galaxy understood why humanity called itself the most peaceful species among the stars. Because when you are capable of absolute destruction, peace was always a choice. And humans always kept their word.